Right now, I am delighted to pass the floor to Dina Hanania, who will be moderating our session 3, titled Operationalizing Safety by Design to Prevent TFGBV. Dina has served as a gender-based violence in emergencies advisor and safe technology in humanitarian settings at CARE's Humanitarian Affairs team, where she leads currently the work to ensure digital initiatives are designed with safety for women and girls, and this being built from the start by design. And Dina is joined by Anna and Tarunima, who are also shaping inspiring initiatives that I follow for the last couple of years. So I'm very happy to welcome you all. Dina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lulu, and hello, everyone. Welcome to the world of operationalizing safety by design, our deep dive for the next 45 minutes or so. I spend a lot of time thinking about what it actually means to build technology that doesn't harm the very people it's meant to help. And today we have two practitioners in this room who have had to make consequential design decisions to ensure that the safety of women and girls is upheld and protected from the very beginning of thinking through a new digital product or solution. And today we're going to get very specific about what those decisions were and why they matter. So let me introduce them briefly. Ana Ramirez is the co-founder and executive director of Euki, a tech nonprofit that co-creates digital tools with and for communities that are facing the greatest barriers to sexual and reproductive healthcare. Anna has had to think hard about what safe really means in environments where the exploitation of users' health data may put them at risk. We're also joined today by Tarunima Prabhakar, who's a technologist, policy researcher, and co-founder of Tattle, an organization that builds technologies and data sets to amplify civic responses to online harms, such as misinformation and online gendered abuse. And Tarunima works where language, culture, and safety intersect in contexts where mainstream AI safety tools were simply not designed for the communities most at risk. Welcome, Anna. Welcome, Tarunima. Really great to have you here with us today. And before we dive in, I'll just take a few minutes to set the stage. A lot of conversations about tech and GBV focus on what happens after harm is already perpetrated. Content gets reported, it gets reviewed, sometimes it gets removed, and even then could reappear under a new account. But that cycle of report, review, remove is reactive. It's necessary, but it's not enough alone. And what we're here to explore together today is a powerful and complementary proactive approach, and that's safety by design. And the core premise here is that the decisions that determine whether technology protects or endangers its users, and in particular women and girls, are made long before any users opens an app, for instance. They're made when project teams make decisions about designing tech solutions for women and girls, when engineers choose where to store data, when product designers decide which features to build. And so safety by design means that those decisions are made with harm prevention as the first principle, not as an afterthought or as a path applied after something goes wrong. And so here, safety by design flips the usual script. It says safety isn't a feature that you add, but it's rather a condition of that design itself. Every decision that shapes technology either builds safety in or leaves it out. And feminist technologists are operationalizing proactive, preventative design to mitigate the risks of tech-facilitated GBV every single day. And we're very lucky to have two incredible panelists with us to speak to some real-world examples. If you design technology for your most vulnerable user, for instance, a survivor of tech-facilitated GBV whose phone may be monitored by an abusive partner or whose language isn't recognized by mainstream safety tools, you end up building something safer for everyone, not just for her, the survivor, but for all users. And the thing about that is that it's not only useful for GBV digital solutions. If the tech industry at large designed for a survivor of tech-facilitated GBV in a restrictive setting as one of its default users, then you get safer products for everyone. So these kind of margins and designing from the margins really illuminates what truly safe design requires. And both of our speakers today did exactly that. So before I turn to our speakers, which I know will be the most exciting part of this session, I want to introduce you to the framework that we'll be using to connect their work today. The handout that you'll find in the chat shortly is a safety matrix that's developed from the UNFPA guidance on safe and ethical tech for GBV, as well as global minimum standards across health, data, and digital development. You'll notice the handout maps 5 core risk areas that require design thinking for safety. So that's data privacy and security, systemic and institutional risks, access control, individual physical safety, and user interaction. And for each one, the safety matrix names the specific threat, as well as some possible design choices that are required to address it. And both of our panelists will speak to what operationalizing this looks like in practice. So with that, let's dive in. And I'll turn to you first, Anna. Anna is going to take us inside the design process at Euki. The risks that Anna designs against are not just hypothetical for Euki's users, but they really map onto the broader threat landscape that we see in tech-facilitated GBV contexts. Anna, can you please briefly introduce us to Euki and tell us what does safe actually mean when you're building technology for SRH? Anna, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't have said any of that better myself, and I probably will be repeating quite a few of the key points that you just pointed out. So thank you all for having me. As has been said, my name is Anna Ramirez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in the United States, and I'm the co-founder and executive director at Euki. This is going to be a very visual presentation, so I have slides. I hope it does not bore you, but I'm going to go ahead and dive in. So just very briefly, we're Euki. We are a tech nonprofit that work at the intersection of reproductive health and digital privacy. Our mission is to co-create accessible, private, and digital health tools with and for people and communities facing barriers to sexual and reproductive health care and information. The decisions of our technology design and governance have seldom reflected the voices of communities most impacted by health inequity. And in the US context where we work, this means young people, people of color, transgender folks, and people living in restrictive contexts. Core to our mission is our co-design approach, where we recruit, pay, and work with a cohort of our users who hold intersections of all of these identities. We meet with them every month throughout the year to build solutions for them, by them, with them. We call this program our user advisory team. It's both a participatory design program and a skills development program. I could speak at length about this approach to design, but the key takeaways that I hope you leave with today are that co-design is a recognition that people are the experts in their own lives, and co-design is a shift in power for users to create products they truly want and need. This commitment to the way that we build technology is truly the foundation of our work at Euki because it's the special sauce that allows us to produce privacy-first products. And we believe that when tech meets the needs of those who face the most barriers, everyone benefits. And the output of this process is the Euki app. It's a privacy-first period tracking app. We initially released the app in 2019. And the need for the Euki app emerged from a body of rigorous scientific research that was then translated into a product with our user advisory team. The Euki app is free to all users and connects the importance of daily reproductive health tracking with comprehensive sexual health information that empowers users to make informed decisions about their bodies and their data. The Euki app is available in both iOS and Android or Google Play Store, and is available at the moment in English and Spanish. So I encourage you to download it and try it for yourself. But for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus on how co-creating with users who face the greatest barriers to healthcare and increased surveillance over their reproductive health decisions ultimately leads to creating a tool that centers privacy. This approach is more commonly described as designing from the margins. That was not something that was articulated at the time when we first started designing this product. It is now, I think, a more widely understood concept. So user privacy is the absolute center of all of the design and functionality that we have with the Euki app. And this approach is what makes Euki app such an important tool to help prevent gender-based violence for a variety of users and use cases. I'm going to walk through 5 real threats that already exist for our users and already existed back in 2018 when we were originally developing the app. Threats that have only increased since. We think of them in 2 overarching categories. The first is threats from government or state surveillance. And the second is threats from the people in our lives. This means parents, guardians, or relatives, or other people in the lives of young people, unsupportive partners, especially for those dealing with intimate partner violence, and even just an unsupportive community at large. An increasing threat that people are feeling today is the risk of data being accessed by government or state actors. This comes in the form of a subpoena to a company like Euki or other consumer-facing products that are not protected by health privacy laws. These legal mandates put companies in a very difficult position as they must comply with the law. This threat already existed for many communities years ago, but for that reason, we decided at the app's inception that we would not be a vector of risk for our users. Our solution is local data storage, meaning that all user data is stored on their device and not in a cloud or server infrastructure. This means that we do not have any access to user data through the app, and if we are subpoenaed for user data, we have nothing to provide. The risk of collecting personally identifiable data can also be problematic for subpoena risk or hacking of sensitive health data. We also know that asking users for this information when it's tied to their intimate health tracking can sow feelings of distrust for how the product might then use that information. So as a result, the Euki app does not require users to create accounts or provide any personally identifiable information. We only suggest in the onboarding that users consider setting up a PIN to enter the app. In the category of surveillance from the people in our lives, this is usually much more physical surveillance, meaning that someone might have access to your physical device rather than the backend databases. We know that browser histories can be quite sensitive, as the internet is where many of us turn to for information. The Euki app links to many external websites as trusted additional resources for users to look through for more in-depth information about a certain sexual and reproductive health topic. Given the sensitivity of these topics, the concerns of our users might have of others seeing their browser history, the Euki app has an internal no-log browser that allows users to safely click on links without leaving the app. In contrast, we're more commonly accustomed to clicking on a link within an app and then it opening a default browser application like Safari or Chrome. And so we have designed a counter experience to that. Along with device confiscation comes the risk of forced entry to any app. By default, the Euki app was intentionally named and branded as something that has no suggestion of what might be stored within the app. But in the case that a user who, say, is dealing with a controlling partner or intimate partner violence, and that partner demands that they open the app, the user has several points of friction at their disposal to not open the app. The first is a digit entry passcode, intentionally not facial recognition, as this is easily forced. The second is a backup passcode that all users are told about in onboarding that they can use if forced to enter. This code will not allow the app to open, and it will not give away that is also not the correct passcode. So it's sort of a secret passcode. Third is a complete control of data retention. So users can delete all of their data at once or set a periodic wiping schedule if they are concerned about others accessing the app. This is very similar to how messages on messaging apps like Signal and I believe WhatsApp now can set expiration on messages. And just like browser history, we can be, just like how browser history can be quite sensitive, so can the display of the topics that the Euki app information section has, which covers topics ranging from menstruation to abortion to STIs. Over-the-shoulder monitoring is exactly what it sounds like, someone peeking at your phone to see what you're doing. One of the ways we minimize the risk of unapproving eyes seeing something private is by a simple customization of display. Users can reorder, hide, or even rename each of the information tiles. And the images are designed intentionally so that they do not give away what the content might be simply by looking at the image. And my final point to leave you with is this: less is more. Because when we design with and for our most sensitive users, we realize that people want control over their bodies and their data. So whether you're a builder of technology, a builder of programs, or just a user of technology, think about the ways that your choices around data collection or the technology you use could cause more harm than good for the people you hope to serve. And that is my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. Incredible work. And what Anna just described maps really beautifully onto the safety matrix handout and naming data privacy and device safety and lots of these other core considerations that, require some very careful thinking about safety by design from the start. And even the decision to reject, a standard safety feature, rather than that being seen as a limitation, it's a design choice that actually keeps women and girls safer. And before we turn to Tarunima, just noticing the parallel here to GBV data risks, that sensitive, identifiable, life-altering if it reaches the wrong person or the wrong party, and the design response really matches that reality. Thanks again, Anna. And Tarunima works in a completely different context, but faces some of the same core challenges for designing for a threat that mainstream technology was not built to see. Tarunima, can you please briefly introduce your work at Tattle and tell us why is your tech safe?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much, and lovely presentation, Anna. I don't use the app yet, but I would definitely try it after this. So hi, everyone. I am Tarunima. I'm the co-founder and I lead strategy and research at Tattle. Tattle is an open source civic tech organization. We're based in India, and we build tools and data sets to respond to online harms here. Our focus is primarily the multilingual context that is India. We have 21 constitutionally recognized languages, but there are actually far more. And as many other countries now in the global majority, it's a highly multimodal communication form of communication. So most people communicate via audio, video, images rather than text. There are three themes of our work. There's misinformation, online gender abuse, and AI safety. Though I have to say that the feminist approach to building technology actually drives almost all of our work. I will, in this presentation, focus specifically on our projects around online gender abuse and specifically the ULI project, and talk about AI safety. So ULI is a project that started in 2021. It was started by us in the Center for Internet Society, primarily to address the challenges of detecting online abuse in the Indian context, because we had discovered that mainstream platforms were doing a pretty lousy job of detecting abuse in our languages. At the time, we engaged with over 30 activists and academics to hear what their challenges were with navigating social media. And some of the needs that we heard were, a need for archiving, which is that when people would go and report a long episode of harassment, online harassment to law enforcement, they were often asked for a record of what had happened. And often either the platform had taken some of that content down, or the perpetrator had taken the content down. And so one of the things that we had heard was that people wanted to be able to archive these episodes that were happening, because even if they hadn't decided to go to law enforcement yet, it was something that they might have to do eventually. We heard need, for people said that they wanted to access mental health related information when they were in an episode, or when they were encountering harassment. They wanted their networks to be mobilized to respond to the harassment they were facing. And then there was the need that we had started with, which is that detection and filtering of abuse in Indian languages was actually poor. These were the four that we have tried to address over the last few years through different projects. So one of the outcomes of this project, now it is in its 5th year, was to create something called the UDI dataset. We engaged 18 activists who spoke Hindi, Tamil, or Indian English to create a data set of explicit and misogynistic content. Not only was the data set labeled or annotated by the experts, it was also something that, like the definition of misogyny and explicit content came from this expert group. And this paper went on to win an outstanding paper award at NACL, which was pretty surprising considering it was a lot of activists and academics submitting something to a core machine learning conference. One of the things that we encountered as we were creating this data set was just meeting the annotators where they were in terms of even the interface for collecting annotations. What we have been mindful of consistently through all of our work is that a lot of the people who participate in the data collection exercises don't want to be identified, that they don't want to be tied to the contribution that they have made, because sometimes that contribution can be sensitive. Often many of the folks we work with are public figures. They are also already quite targeted online. And so we are quite mindful that the contributions, even as they are made, are anonymous. There was one person who did not want to be even identified as the author. So while everyone is attributed as the author of the paper, we basically obfuscated, and there should be no way of identifying who labeled what, right, and who marked a specific post what. Another thing that we did through this project in 2021-2022 was to build out a plugin through which people could archive the content, which is a need we heard at that point. And also through which they could continue contributing to these data sets that we were creating. So one of the data sets we created alongside the UDI data set was a database of words that are used to target gender minorities in India. All the contributions in version 1.0, which was in 2022, were anonymous. Whether someone contributed to the slurs or whether someone archived the content, all of it was stored locally. But as what happened over time was that the database became bigger. At this point, it is the largest database, public database of abusive words in Indian languages. It is used by platforms. It is used by AI companies. It is used by academics. And so over time, that it became quite important to make sure that this database was not going to be weaponized or poisoned by spurious contributions. So what we have had to do now is to basically have people log in via an email ID. We don't particularly care about identifying or know who is behind that email ID. The only thing we want to do is to tie the contributions to a specific ID, so that in case or in retrospect we realize that a certain contributor or a certain data donor was actually mischievous or was trying to abuse the database, we would be able to retract and remove all their contributions. I will just quickly show what the database looks like at the moment. It is a little bit disturbing, so there is a trigger warning, but I am just going to show this to see, just to point out to the richness of the data. So what we are asking from all the experts that we work with is to tell us, what is the level of severity of the word. Just to note that because it's a very multilingual context, the same word means different things in different parts of the country, even if it's Hindi. So it is abusive in one part of in one state in India, but it's not. It's actually like a affectionate term. And so slurs change meaning over time. The other thing is that the LGBT community actually might use a word as an appropriated word. It's within the group, it is not considered to be abusive, but when it is used by someone outside of that community, it is abusive, right? So we also collect some information about whether something is appropriated, and then we collect this. We ask people to write out why they think that certain word is problematic. As you can see, there is no there is no way to tie who has contributed a specific meaning. What we want is for as much of the what we want is for as many times, if people find new meanings to a word, or if they have an alternate meaning to a word, they just add another row and entry for it. But they don't, the contributor name, etc., is not actually visible to anyone else who's using the data. So the tricky thing again is that, we did start by saying that everything should be anonymous, but we have got to a place where we have needed an ID. But again, data minimalism is the key. We are only collecting the very minimal that we need at this stage. The other thing is that there is a plugin as well, where this was the plugin through which we had first archived the content, or through which enabled people to archive the content. It is also something that will highlight when these words are visible on your browser. This was something that academics had asked us for because they thought it would be useful as an exercise in their classrooms. And again, the use of this plugin is completely anonymous. You don't really need to log in to use this plugin. If you want to contribute to the data, there is an email ID that you need to provide and create an account. I will pause at this and just quickly go into our work also on AI safety as a second theme to talk about safety and design in this sort of new world. Now, we've been doing two things. We've been doing foundational model testing, and we've been building support for applications, primarily chatbots, and doing safety guardrails for them. In foundational model testing, what we have found, again, is that in low resource languages, which is most languages of the world, there is very poor representation in the data sets that are used to train AI models. And what that means is that actually they perform poorly in our languages, and also that there are safety risks that are sort of magnified in languages outside of the core sort of 5 or 6 UN languages. So we tested AI safety models in Hindi for 2 categories, which were sex-related crimes and hate. And we found that there were 3 ways in which, and again, this was the same participatory approach with an expert group that belongs to or has supported survivors or has worked with perpetrators as well. And we found that there were 3 ways in which the existing foundational models are failing low resource languages. One, that the risks are documented, but they're not handled in Indian languages, or they're not handled in low resource languages. So for example, if you ask certain models prompts about, which tribe looks like a specific gender, which tribe looks like a specific animal, it will give an answer in Hindi when it will not give an answer in English. Also, that a lot of sex-related crimes are contextual, right? So, for example, acid attacks are a crime that occurs quite commonly in South Asia and Middle East, but that's not even a crime that is recognized by some of these frameworks. And then also that, it intersects with a lot of, so sexual violence intersects with a lot of identity types, like, for example, caste in India. And again, those kind of intersections and what that sexual violence looks like is, again, not documented in the framework. And then overall, there is some overall issue with how we look at AI safety testing, which is that we are like, there are certain things that might not be illegal, but that doesn't mean that they are okay, and that it doesn't mean that your foundational models endorse it or encourage it, right? So there are some overall issues. And then when we look at image-based models or models that generate images and videos, we actually find even fewer safeguards, and we find, and I think this is something that the previous speakers have also alluded to. I'll just conclude by saying that specifically with AI systems and chatbots, we've actually found that safety and user experience are quite linked. This is also drawing from the work we've done with other nonprofits looking at their applications and trying to build solutions for them or guardrails for them. And so I will, without going too much into this, end my presentation, and I will look forward to the questions on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarunima. Great presentation and two completely different contexts, but some of the same through lines that when you design from the margins, when you work and design directly with the people most at risk, you embed safety to mitigate these real risks that women and girls face. And really a great example of participatory risk mapping, which is also one of the foundational principles in the safety matrix that you all have access to for this session and beyond, and a great example of safety by design in practice. So for this next segment of the session, I'd love for us all to apply that same thinking together to a red teaming scenario exercise. So before we close and turn to a Q&A, we'll turn to an interactive scenario exercise that I would love for all of you, our audience, to engage in. And it's a red teaming scenario. So for those who may not be very familiar, the term red teaming comes from cybersecurity. It's the practice of thinking like an adversary. In many ways, you take a system and you ask, how could this be exploited, or who does this harm, and where are the gaps between what the system promises to offer and what it actually does. And in our field, we apply the same lens to technology to think through tech-facilitated GBV risks and build better. So for this next portion, I have a scenario that I'd love for all our participants to think through and engage with, to start to apply safety by design thinking in practice. So I'll share the scenario briefly. I hope you can all see my screen okay. But this is kind of a hypothetical scenario that builds on a lot of what we're seeing play out in real time in the humanitarian space. And so hypothetically, a humanitarian organization has built a generative AI chatbot to help GBV survivors find information about GBV services and access psychosocial support. The chatbot markets itself as always available and completely anonymous. And in practice, it saves conversation history to improve the AI model. It also lets survivors share a chat summary with a support worker via a link. It has guardrails that flag any crisis language and redirect the user to call a helpline if any of that is detected. So I have a couple of questions for all of you and would love to get some responses going in the chat. The first is, based on everything you've heard today, how do you think, how could an abusive partner, a perpetrator, authorities, or the platform itself weaponize any part of this design? And then the second question is, how would you redesign a specific element of this using what we've heard today from Anna and Tarunima? So I'll give you a few seconds to start thinking a bit about this scenario, and would love to get your thoughts and inputs in the chat. Any thoughts from the audience? Well, maybe in the meantime, any thoughts or inputs from any of our panelists?
I was wondering if we should also jump in or wait for everyone to type things out. I have many thoughts, and I'm guessing, Anna, so do you.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing now a couple of things start to come through in the chat, and then I'll hand over to you, Tarunima, for your quick thoughts as well. Stephanie's asking who owns the AI model that the chat history is going into and who has access to it, which is a great question that I think opens up a whole host of risks. And from Victoria, from the platform chat, geolocations of otherwise discrete service providers may be used to shut down such services or activities, which of course is a real risk in many places where we work. Tarunima, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I would like to know what the reasons are for having persistent and a long conversation history. From all my experience of chatbots, I don't think it's particularly needed to do a good job for providing information. Your knowledge base is generally quite restricted. So I think there are lots of ways of abusing that chat history, and I think there are very few positives or like upside for having that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and kind of on that always anonymous claim when paired with the saving of chat history, I think there's kind of a paradox there, and interesting findings in a recent study that was published in the International Review of the Red Cross, authored by Caroline Musbungi and Sarah Spencer, finding that chatbots sometimes promise that full anonymity, but have terms of services that tell a different story, where user conversations can be used to train AI models, and platforms, cannot guarantee complete data security. So back to the safety matrix, that's really the data privacy role of your safety matrix and the importance of asking those hard questions up front. Anna, anything from you?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts. But I think your point about what a marketing statement about data privacy says versus the terms of service or a privacy policy are very important distinctions to make for all the products that we're choosing to use, especially as we, I think in the US reproductive health space or in maybe consumer tech, there's a lot of marketing push for privacy language. Because there is more of a demand by users, but the terms of service will tell you what's really happening. So I think it's a really important point to make for all of us. I think what I would do in order to even, before getting to making recommendations on what to do, I'd want to understand more about the context, and what, who are the users that we are most concerned about, that we think will be using this, that we're designing for, to understand what are their primary threats and start tackling interventions or modifications to this that would address the largest threats to them. And that is just, I think, basic threat modeling, risk analysis that is really important to involve your most sensitive users in order to figure out what your priorities might be for your product. But on principle, also, less is more for data retention. I completely agree with what was already shared about why are we saving chat histories, who has access to this. I think we all might lean on AI as this very sexy new thing. It can solve all this people time issues by being available all the time and move quickly. But I have a lot of hesitation of immediately jumping to AI as a solution for something that is going to be collecting and engaging in such sensitive, personally sensitive and potentially high risk information sharing with people.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anna. Great points. And you'll notice, this scenario was intentionally a minefield of risks to get us to start thinking about a lot of these very real design decisions that have enormous potential for harm and impact on the people that we're all serving. And as well as kind of coming full circle on some of the themes of this session from the very beginning, I'm seeing a really beautiful summary from Rosemary and Neen in the chat, where she kind of summarized all of these different key points coming up around safe chat histories, even possibly being accessed by abusive partner or authorities or exposed to a data breach, while the anonymous claim kind of creates that false trust. Lots of ideas I'm seeing come in the chat for ways that we can make this safer. There are many, but hopefully kind of a helpful way to start thinking about how safety by design can travel with you beyond this session as you think about or interact with different tech solutions in your daily lives and in your work as well. So with that, we have a couple of minutes left for what we're calling the safety hacks portion of the session, where we'll get to hear very quick safety hacks from each of our panelists and then dedicate the rest of our time to answering one question that we have received in the Q&A so far. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can try to get to them quickly on this session, and of course, happy to engage after the session as well. But let's start maybe with you, Tarunima, first this time. Do you have one safety hack that you'd like to leave the audience with after the session based on your experience?
It's interesting. You're asking me for one. I did like a big cybersecurity training. As I was in it yesterday, so I have a lot of things that I feel like I need to do better. I guess one I would say is that it's not a hack. It's to think of your threat model, and this is something we have to think about as well in terms of whether we are worried about surveillance by the state or are we worried about surveillance by tech companies. And of course, they overlap. But often you have to worry, in specific cases, you have to worry more about one than the other. And so when I look at my personal devices or my personal usage, for example, I pay a fair bit of attention to surveillance by my mobile phone provider, by Google, etc. And so I've lately been nerding out on keyboards and trying to figure out how do you work with a privacy preserving keyboard, because actually on our phones, everything you type, if that keyboard, if everything you're typing is going to another third party, which for most keyboards it does, whatever your app might be, your keyboard actually is an overarching app. So I think that's what I would say. In my personal capacity, I think we all can worry more about tech surveillance, but I think for a lot of the things in our work, our threat actors are not, often we are more comfortable about the tech actors and we're not as worried about that surveillance. It's not a hack. Sorry, it's a long answer.
Well, great. Thank you. Back to the basics. Thanks, Tarunima. Anna, a quick kind of practical, concrete thing for people to take into their next meeting, their next design session, their next funding conversation in 30 seconds or less, if you can.
Yeah, I think it comes back to threat modeling and this point about reading your terms of service and privacy policy. We all have to rely on technology for one reason or another. So whether it's your personal interaction with an app, for example, or your work's decision around which CRM or email service provider or what have you that you're choosing as your internal infrastructure, we don't all have to worry about every single piece of technology because not everything is a threat, or maybe not all the data we're thinking about is super sensitive. So I say, really think about what data are you most concerned about for yourself or the people that you serve, and read the privacy policies of those services, understand how they manage subpoena, understand how they're storing data, and make decisions about which tools you are comfortable engaging with, because some of them might not present big threats to you, even if they are collecting data, because we do have to figure out the friction point of needing to rely on technology that isn't doing privacy by design while also trying to do our best job at protecting the most sensitive data for the people we care about most. So read your privacy policy.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate all the insights for making this so specific, so honest. Thank you all to our audience. I see there's a couple of questions in the Q&A we didn't get to that I hope our panelists will be able to answer in the chat, and hold on to the safety matrix, and definitely travels way beyond tonight. So with that, I will hand it back to Lulu for our next session, which I know will kind of keep us diving deeper into some of the more complex places where we work. Thanks all.